Holy Jichin, and welcome to Shift+F1, a podcast about speedy race cars. That, by the way, is Chinese for a crane standing in a flock of chicken. Meaning someone who stands out from the others, just like a certain Max Verstappen. I'm Drew Scanlon. Joining me, Danny O'Dwyer. How are you, Danny?
I'm doing great. We have to talk about Max Verstappen at the start of the podcast because he so often doesn't come up in the race recap. So it's like I feel like we'd be doing a disservice to Red Bull and Max fans if we didn't constantly get him in there.
Right.
You know,
Check the box.
Exactly. We got it. No, the Checo's the other guy. Jeez, that's
sorry.
Yeah.
Also joining us, Rob Zachney. How are you, Rob?
Trying to keep the many race sessions separate in my head as to what happened when, and struggling mightily. Like anything I don't have in a note, I'm probably completely lost in time as to when it happened.
Yeah.
Rob, that was at the 2019 Chinese Grand Prix. Oh no!
If you're new to this podcast, a very warm welcome to you. And if you are new to Formula One itself, we recommend listening to our preseason primer episode, which assumes no prior F1 knowledge and explains how the sport works and who everybody is. So if you'd like to go back and listen to that, it's episode 257. Also, this show would not be possible without our audience over at patreon.com/shiftf1, where every month we release an ad-free version of the podcast. No ads. Hashtag no ads.
Hashtag no ads.
With bonus podcasts and videos exclusively for our patrons that cover racing documentaries and films, F1 video games, experiments with the racing series, and a lot of weird things. So if you would like to support the show and get access to all that fun stuff, head over to patreon.com/shiftf1 or click the link in the show notes. What's going on in Patreon land this month, Danny?
Well, we spent a lot of time in contemporary racing, contemporary F1 actually, with our past 2 months of reviewing Drive to Survive season 58 or whatever it is. So instead, we're going to go into the world of classic motorsports. And what is more classic than washed up racers learning how to work in Hollywood by becoming stunt people? We're going to watch I'm not sure if that's probably not even the synopsis of this movie because I've not seen it yet.
This movie is so weird.
It's 1980s The Stunt Man. A movie that has been recommended to us by many folks. I don't think any of us have watched. Drew, have you seen it? Maybe you've seen it.
I've seen it a long time ago.
Okay. And by the looks of the trailer, it looks like stuff happens in this movie.
Yeah.
It looks very 80s. It looks kind of 70s. It looks kind of like...
in my mind, it's the 70s.
Yeah.
I think in the feels, it is a 70s movie.
What was the one we watched with all of the guy who owned like 70 classic cars...
that's Gone in 60 Seconds.
Gone in 60 Seconds.
Yeah.
It
does have a sort of feel.
That vibe. Okay, that's what I'm hoping. Back when, like, especially a movie about stunt drivers, I feel like that maybe that even, pushes the boat out that little bit more.
I think both of you are going to find a lot of things to latch onto.
In the stunt.
If I remember things correctly. Yeah.
Okay. Well, if you want to listen to that podcast, make sure you become one of our incredibly beautiful and talented and handsome patrons, including our incredible title sponsors, Profit, Get Rich or Die Ryan, Agave ATX, Cyphers Trading, Turf SCS, at Team Blackjack, Michael Maves, Gordy's Army. Gordy's Army. I thought he said arming. Gordy's arming someone. Maybe he's arming at Talking Autos. Olivia Evans, telemetrydeck.com, FDC, Drew Stewart, Bailey Foote, Abdullah Al-Thani, Jason Chadwick, Abraham Getchell, The Space Above Us podcast. Buddy Crimes finds advertising unethical. Snigs, Alex Couchet, Max Voltar, Circuit Demon, Troy Stammer, William Rumpf, Irvine Clinical Research, Lachlan the Maddened Man, Samurai Love Story. I've been watching that. It's great. Shogun's a great show. Everyone should watch that. And Jason Kelly. Thank you all so much to our beautiful patrons. Let's talk about China. So much racing.
So much racing. Okay, let's just jump right into it. The sprint. On a surface.
Speaking of surface.
Resurfaced? Repainted? What happened? What's going on?
I thought it was a new surface, and then when I was tuning into practice, they were like, everyone's freaked out. They just gave it a lick of paint. They put some tarmac Adam on the top. Rob, do you know what exactly happened here? It seemed very...
No, and that's the weird thing. There didn't seem to be a clear answer. The first reaction was the first reaction from the teams was it looked like the tarmac had been painted. The darkness of the tarmac was suggested paint. What came out later is apparently I pronounced this wrong, but like the thought was that there's a bitumen finish on it. That is sort of a road resurfacing like and sealing technique used pretty commonly on like highways, but nobody was sure. Like this had been done, and nobody knew it was done, including Pirelli, which they always want to know what track what's the track surface going to be like. And then there's always the question as to how is that going to affect it if it gets wet at all. The other weird thing was that, perhaps related, perhaps not, in free practice they started having grass fires cropping up on the margin of the track, and that continued into the sprint shootout qualifying, where you had the grass fire catch, I think, in the first session, I want to say. And, you know, the commentators are like, well, there goes, the track is on fire again.
Right. And I didn't watch practice. And so I was like, what are you talking about?
Again.
Why is the ground on fire, guys?
I think as Californians as well, we react very differently to so it's like when you see a fire on the side of the highway and you're like, oh no, 15 fire trucks are going to be here in any second. I've got to get out of here. I was trying to figure out what was going on. Was this like, I get it's dry there and it was warm-ish. I mean, it was raining as well.
So green?
People were suggesting it was the sparking.
That's what I was thinking.
But that's the thing. So it did look green.
Yes.
So did the finish they sprayed the track down with, like, did particles that were maybe a little more flammable get on the grass? Or sometimes if, like, an area's been a bit parched and you see really green grass, that could be suggestive that the grass is painted. Which we saw, like, famously in an NFL game last year.
What?
Where I think was it a Cardinals game? Their field died, and they just painted the dead grass green, and then, like, within a quarter, the field had just completely fallen apart because it was just dead grass on top of a bed of desiccated dirt, and the paint did not help. So I don't know. Like that was another sort of weird quirk of this. It didn't happen after that qualifying session. It stopped, but they started getting rain, across the weekend at that point.
You just don't seeing fire at a track. It's just immediately you're like, there's a lot of petrol around here. I don't know. We don't need this going on.
It's like fire in an airplane or a submarine. It's just automatically bad.
Exactly.
But yeah, we call rain the great equalizer because it tends to lessen the differences between the cars, which makes sense if you think about it in terms of grip. Every car is trying to translate its engine power to speed through the tires, but there's only so much power you can put into the tires before they lose grip and don't move you forward. And if the track is wet, that limit comes down for everyone. So kind of an insane session here at the end of the sprint qualifying session. I think we've lost the shootout moniker in the off season.
Right, because now they call the race the shootout.
Is that right? The sprint shootout?
Say that's what they're calling it. I want to say they're calling it.
I just heard people say SQ3 a lot, and I was like, ugh.
Yeah. Well, for SQ3, we get intermittent rain, and I think everybody was just like fueling for 3 laps. Let's just go in here and not worry about pit stops because who knows how this rain's going to change. Hamilton, though, did not. He stayed in and let the track develop and then went out and did 2 laps. Verstappen had 2 laps deleted because he went off of the track and then on his last one set a 2.00. Lando Norris got pole position, again, because the great equalizer, rain, then had his time deleted. Meanwhile, Hamilton was on his last flying lap and was improving, and then right as Hamilton crossed the line, Norris's lap was reinstated, putting him at the top of the grid.
The reason they did this is because there is a rule where if you go off the track on the final turn, it makes the lap that you finished on, deletes that lap, but it also deletes the next lap because you could have gained an advantage by taking a different line into the start-finish straight. But I guess McLaren had protested this, saying he was in the gravel. There was no benefit.
Getting any advantage there.
Yeah, and they pretty quickly, and I think sensibly, said, yeah, that's fair. Worth mentioning that these were 2-minute laps. The qualifying laps for the race were in the 1:33s. So they were losing significant time. And it was just, what I really liked about this was obviously the track was evolving. So it was just bananas. At one stage, I think it was it Bottas was on pole at one stage? It was the times were just falling down. But also it reminded me of sort of classic F1 where you did have drivers just going lap for lap you don't tend to have them, they'll do a recharge lap or something because they're trying to get all their MGU charged back up again for the next lap. They can't just go lap for lap for lap. But when they're losing 30 seconds because of rain, the amount of electrical they have is sort of less of a factor. So it was cool. That's kind of what qualifying used to be at the end. As the times went down, they were losing fuel and they were gaining maybe a bit of an advantage. But obviously in the hybrid era, we don't get to enjoy that as much. So that was pretty cool.
Oh, one other cool thing. Zhou Guanyu turning in the performance career. If you could pick a moment to actually show out, it would be at your first and maybe only home Grand Prix, given some of the rumors about Audi wants a top shelf lineup of drivers that they're sniffing around signs. So this was Zhou's first, he came into the sport right after they stopped having Chinese Grand Prix.
Yes. Yeah.
And in the sprint qualifying at least, really had pace.
Got to Q3. Yeah.
He did. And
SQ3.
huge applause at the end of SQ2 when the crowd realized that he had advanced. And honestly, a lot of great crowd response throughout the weekend. I feel like I was hearing applause at every overtake. It was great.
Yeah, they were great. They turned up as well.
They sure did. But yeah, just to run down the sprint grid here, Lando Norris on pole, followed by Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso, and then Max Verstappen, having only that one last 2.00 lap. Then Carlos Sainz in 5th, Sergio Perez 6th, Charles Leclerc 7th, Oscar Piastri 8th, Valtteri Bottas in 9th, and Zhou Guanyu rounding out the top 10. Behind them, we've got Russell, Magnussen, who somehow avoided a penalty for impeding signs, Hülkenberg, Ricciardo, Stroll in 15th, Gasly, Albon, Albon, Tsunoda, Sargent. Danny, do you want to take us through the start of the sprint?
Sure. Danny O the sprint is what they call me. Lando, Hamilton, Alonso. So we got 4, 44, and 14 lined up in 1, 2, 3, which I quite enjoyed. Lando, this is becoming a little bit of a trend, a worrying thing, where he qualifies well and then has a little bit of trouble off the line. They start and Lewis gets a good start. Lando kind of bogs it down. It's not anti-stall levels of bog down, but he has trouble getting out of the lower gear. As they enter the crazy hook of a first 2 turns that we talked about. Hamilton has the corner and Lando's going around the outside, and because of the sort of parabolic nature of this corner, the angle that you have around the outside just gets smaller and smaller, especially if it's Hamilton here, who's basically, Alonso's not threatening the inside line or anything, and you can't really threaten the inside line in the latter half of this corner. You kind of at the start maybe and push the other person out, but once you've gotten there, it's all free real estate. And he, sits his car in the middle of the turn. Lando keeps with him, trying to hang it out, and I think he just ends up on a bit of track that really doesn't want to give him any grip, and he moves off the track on the left side and has to correct to come back on. And when he does, he ends up behind Charles Leclerc. So he's in 7th position basically at that stage. He's basically with his teammate, with Piastri at that stage. So kind of the worst possible start for Lando. Verstappen's starting 4th. So he's probably not going to win the race, but the folks he was racing were definitely the 2 Ferraris who he found himself behind. Definitely Lewis Hamilton and Alonso, who he also found himself behind. So yeah, really after a fantastic qualifying, it was disappointing to see it.
Quick thing, what was funny was Nico Rosberg was the color commentary guy this weekend on the Sky broadcast.
He sure was, Rob.
You know what though? I found he is an odd duck.
He is.
But also, there's times he really knows his shit about these cars in particular, his knowledge. Karun stopped driving before they hit this generation of car. Like, Nico's the closest to the spec has changed, but I think the power unit and a lot of the systems were the same when Nico drove. He saw that Lando was going to get into trouble on his start with the release for the formation lap. Remember, he saw him like sort of lurch out of the box with a ton of wheel spin, and he was like, "That's not good.
Oh wow,
that's not." And Crofty was like, "Well, maybe he was laying down rubber." And Rico was like, "No, he just would. No, he would not do that. That bodes very poorly for his start. It was a very good called shot."
Nico was, Rosberg was interesting because he's kind of a bad commentator. Like, there were parts where Crofty would go like, bah, 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 do his whole thing and then stop and then to be silence. Like, Nico, you're color commentator, dude. You got to jump in here. But then he would come out with these like Crofty would also say something and then he'd go, no, what's actually happening is this. And he was always right. But it made the banter was awkward. It was like sometimes Crofty was
no ja und.
Yeah, it was yeah, exactly. So yeah, it was after a while I got so uncomfortable listening to the two of them that I swapped over.
Yeah, I listened to F1 TV on this one. So yeah, lap 7 is when Verstappen finally, tires get switched on. He gets by Alonso with DRS on the back straight for second place. And then 2 laps later, after a lockup from Hamilton ahead, Verstappen gets by at that same place for the lead of the sprint. And then on lap 16 of 19, all hell breaks loose.
Yeah.
So there is a train behind Alonso, who's in third.
El Plan.
Is this El Plan?
This is El Plan.
Consisting of Sainz, Perez, and then Leclerc in 4th, 5th, and 6th. So Sainz attempts a move around the outside of turn 6, I believe, but it is expertly blocked by Alonso. Sainz then cuts back, gets great traction out of the corner, pulls ahead of Alonso, but Alonso has the inside of the next turn, and so they go side by side through these sweeping turns of Sector 2, which is great. Puffs of smoke as they touch tires, and Sainz gets ahead, but only for a moment as Alonso dives up the inside of this low-speed corner, regaining the place but pushing both of them wide and allowing for Sergio Perez to swoop in and take both positions. Now, Alonso then loses momentum here, possibly due to a puncture, and the Ferraris both pounce. Sainz and Leclerc getting by him in the space of 2 corners. But now Leclerc is not done and takes the fight to his teammate, pulling alongside of Sainz as they head into the hairpin. Sainz then going deep, bumping wheels with Leclerc and pushing him off of the track. Leclerc then fights back, gets DRS down the main straight, and sets up a pass for turn 2 and takes the place. I thought Alex Jakes was going to have an aneurysm.
It was awesome. It was a real, like, you couldn't, when Perez jumped out in front, you just weren't expecting it, I guess. And the battle, I think I felt really bad that Alonso had gotten, I mean, we talk about how sometimes he can be quite aggressive and stuff, but his overtake on Sainz where he got the puncture in the end, I thought was fantastic. Like, the angle he took to get down the inside. The Sainz never saw it coming. He's just, Alonso totally had him. And it's just a shame that they ended up having a coming together there. But yeah, it was great. It was in a race that kind of needed it, Like, I enjoyed the last 4 laps of this sprint a lot. It was maybe the best racing of the whole weekend.
Yeah, and something that kind of struck me watching this, and Danny, we talked about this a little bit before the show. I think I'm coming around on the sprint.
Okay, all right, here we go.
Well, hang on. Is this just coincidental? Like, it's a new format.
Yeah.
I think that helps it. So I'll say, so just to explain myself here, especially when faster cars are out of position, it gives other teams a chance to get points, right? Because there's not as much time for the faster cars to catch up and overtake. Or to do so with an undercut since there are no pit stops. Max Verstappen accepted because he's an alien. So this can lead to those great battles because otherwise the slower car just sort of accepts that the faster one is going to pass, and maybe we're not racing them. Yeah. But now in this, they're trying to retain as many points as possible so they actually fight. And And as we saw with the Ferraris, teammate drama can happen there and then adds to the color of the whole race weekend, which is fun. Plus, the cars are lighter at the start, so they can battle quickly. There just isn't time to be patient. There's no nursing of tires. You must attack.
There's basically no strategy race here either, which can often be really good, but it just, the elimination of it basically forces everyone to sort of play ball.
Yeah, I think it does hinge on the fact that you have to have a good quote unquote good qualifying.
Interesting qualifying,
right?
which we did because of the rain.
Yeah. It's rare that we get like, Red Bull, Ferrari, McLaren, Mercedes, or whatever in qualifying. So, theoretically, you would still have relatively mixed grids. But I do agree that the new rules are great because the sprint is now totally separate from the race. It has no bearing on it. It just gets to exist by itself. Parc Ferme, and I wish we would have mentioned this last. I meant to in the last episode, but Parc Ferme now opens after the sprint, so you can modify your car ahead of qualifying. Because normally, without the race weekend or without the sprint in the race weekend, you set your car up for qualifying, and then you are not allowed to make any major adjustments. You can adjust the front wing, but nothing else really for the race. So now that wasn't always the case with the sprint. Now they're separate, so you can adjust your car for the sprint, then you can stop, adjust it for qualifying, and then the race.
Well, I think it stems from the fact that the logic of the sprint weekend, this format has that going for it, where you have day one qualifying for the sprint, then the race. The whole we're gonna do qualifying for the race before a sprint, that was absurd. Where they stacked it up, where you would do you would do qualifying for the race first and then do a sprint. That was that didn't work at all. I do feel like I'm with you that the risk reward for drivers being like, you know what, hell with it, I'm gonna fight it out, because can I hold onto this spot for 6 laps? Yeah, I think I probably can. But I also think they got very lucky with mixed conditions on the qualifying for this race. So I'm curious to see. I think we got good. I think one reason we got good racing here is because we had iffy weather during qualifying, and that seems like the strongest predictor of good racing in F1 historically has been did qualifying get screwed up by weather?
Yeah.
But hey, we had a knockdown drag-out fight for meaningful position here with Alonso and Sainz, and then the first of a few shaky moments for Sainz. Sainz has been, stock is going up, and then I feel like we saw the signs that him running Leclerc out like that and just being this take no prisoners mode, every man for himself. He was in that mode the whole weekend, and sometimes maybe didn't choose his moment particularly well. I think I'm curious to see how Ferrari comes out of this in the end, because I feel like we're this close to them uncorking some real, well, the hell with you,
YOLO.
buddy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Need a job next year. Well, we haven't talked about the main race yet, but in lap 1 suggests that maybe it's going to get worse before it gets better.
All right, well, I'll run down the sprint result here. Max Verstappen takes it for the 8 points, followed by Lewis Hamilton in second. Sergio Perez rounding out the, I guess you'd call it a podium for the sprint. They just kind of stood around and collected some plaques. Charles Leclerc in fourth, Carlos Sainz fifth, followed by Norris, Piastri, Russell, Zhou Guanyu just outside of the points in ninth. This is what I'm talking about. He was racing. Kevin Magnussen in 10th. Then we got Ricardo, Bottas, Ocon, Stroll, Gasly in 15th, Tsunoda, Albon, Sargent, Hulkenberg, and Alonso, who received a 10-second penalty, which is costly in a sprint, for causing a collision.
Boo.
And with that, we are going to take a quick break, and we'll be back to talk about the race. All right, the race. Here we go. The grid. Max Verstappen on pole position for the first time since 1999. A driver has gotten the first 5 pole positions of a season.
He's never won the
Mika
Chinese
Häkkinen.
Grand Prix as well, worth mentioning.
What's that?
He'd never won the Chinese Grand Prix at this stage.
Okay.
As well, worth mentioning. Don't think he had a pole here either.
Sergio Perez in second. Fernando Alonso lines up in third. Followed by Lando Norris, like the sprint. Good qualifying here.
Very close.
Oscar Piastri in fifth. Charles Leclerc in sixth. Carlos Sainz in seventh. Dipped into the gravel at the exit of the final turn. The gravel new for this year. Used to be asphalt runoff.
He also, did he crash in practice? Did we forget about that? Didn't he? Yeah, he did. Didn't he? Wasn't this the one he crashed and he saved it right at the last second? He turned so the wheels would hit flush. Am I crazy?
That's this one. Yeah.
That
He spun. Yeah, it's Q2.
It was
spun
Q2. Sorry.
Yeah, he dropped it in the gravel, spun across the track, hit the barrier, but it was a flush hit. But he did bring out a red flag. Controversially, he is allowed to resume qualifying once the session is restarted, despite stopping on track, which is normally the rule. If you stop on track and cause a red flag, you can't restart.
Yeah.
But apparently the stewards saw that he was able to get going again shortly after the contact with the wall and waived it.
I think it was Aston Martin that lodged a formal complaint over that.
Yeah, sure.
But it didn't stand up. But yeah, it was one of the interesting things. If you watch the onboard, right as he's about to hit the rear of his car, which is like the least protected part of an F1 car, right as it was about to hit, he basically turned the wheel, presumably to try and hit the wall as flush as possible. So he was watching it. You can see the front end skip out, and he doesn't hit it flush, but it worked enough that car could get driven away. So I thought that was really cool. I think it was Rosberg as well was pointing out what a good job he did to save the car basically while he was crashing.
It wasn't even cooler when Alonso had the same incident, but reacted so fast and so smoothly that the car just barely stepped out and then stayed straight as an arrow out of there. But yeah, it was something. By the way, shout outs to that camera angle at that turn where you're at the curb camera of the cars going over that final corner. I feel like that's where you see the rocks blowing around from the suction of the cars. Really did get across the violence of the ground effect as it whips along the ground is a great shot. And honestly, I thought the whole circuit was mic'd up really well. This was a track where I was noticing it sounded more like, wow, they're racing in anger more, particularly on that front straight.
George Russell lines up 8th, followed by Nico Hülkenberg. And in 10th place, Valtteri Bottas in the Sauber. I have here a bullet point under his name with an exclamation point.
Nice.
In 11th, we got Lance Stroll, followed by Ricciardo, his first time out qualifying his teammate Tsunoda this year.
Yeah.
Esteban Ocon in 13th, followed by Albon. Gasly in 15th, then Zhou, Magnussen. And in 18th place, Lewis Hamilton. Lots of track evolution going on in Q1. He had a lockup on his final lap. Really did not pull it together. And we'll start the race 18th. Yuki Tsunoda will start 19th. And Logan Sargent is going to start from the pit lane because his car was modified whilst under Parc Fermé conditions.
Maybe we're also worth mentioning that Ricciardo also sprint qualified ahead of Yuki Tsunoda. It's not official qualification, but he had his number this weekend.
Had that new chassis.
There we go.
Oh. Danny, do you want to take us through the start of the Chinese Grand Prix?
I sure
race?
do. Max Verstappen, great start as ever. He's got it dialed in. The battle between Sergio Perez and Fernando Alonso is where the interesting stuff happens. So Perez attempts to retain that inside line, similar to what Hamilton was doing. But Fernando just gets oodles and oodles of grip going in the middle. He also, I guess, Perez takes it a little bit tighter, but Alonso was ahead of him, as they're crossing the apex of this very long turn.
He goes deep
and dials it in, gets it great. Braking, and he's basically ahead of Perez as just the nature of that corner. The inside line drifts out a little bit, and by the time they'd done that, Alonso was ahead, which was really fantastic. Bit of action in the back, though, with the Ferraris. So Leclerc and Sainz, as they're all going 2 by 2, like little Noah's Ark animals around that turn, The Ferraris are beside each other because they're the next sort of 2x2. There's they're 6th and 7th, but I guess what's happening in the front messes them up a little bit. So they're going in. Leclerc's ahead. Sainz is attempting to sort of hug around with him on the outside as well. And I can't tell still if this is Leclerc trying to defend against Sainz. I think or if it's just a missing the braking zone slightly at the start of a race. I kind of feel like it's maybe a bit of both. But he ends up basically pushing Sainz out and pushing himself out. Like he also takes a horrible line through that turn. And in so doing gives up 2 places. George Russell and Nico Hülkenberg in the Haas managed to get past before the Ferraris can sort of collect themselves and get back on track. As it happens by the end of I think it was on the last turn after the straight, they managed to get past Hülkenberg, or at least Leclerc did, and I think it was right after at the start of the second lap, Sainz managed to do it before turn 1. But just a costly error. Sainz after the race was saying we're going to have to analyze it as a team because obviously that's not great, and it really ruined the start of the race for the two of them.
Well, also not a great start. Hamilton started on the soft tires, hoping to make up some spots on everybody else around him on mediums and hards, but he gets boxed in by Tsunoda, who I think is the only other one on soft tires, and he managed to gain 3 places. Hamilton very quickly on the radio saying, "This is the wrong tire. Please get me off of this." Lap 5, Alonso's second spot isn't secure for long as Perez gets by, and then 2 laps later, Norris, who got an earlier message from his team that Alonso was using up his tires battling with Perez, closes up to Alonso with DRS and gets by him at the end of the back straight for 3rd. It's lap 9 then that Hamilton pits to get off of the soft tires that he hates and onto some mediums, but he's still in 19th place with a lot to do. Lap 9 is also when Leclerc regains his starting position by passing Russell at turn 1, and then 2 laps later gets Piastri at the end of the back straight for 5th place. Lap 21, though, Bottas, running in 11th place, pulls off the track with an engine problem. We get a virtual safety car followed by a full safety car as the marshals are unable to move the car. Couple pits here. Under the virtual safety car, Leclerc and Norris, and then Verstappen and Perez both pit under safety car. Red Bull double stacked them twice.
Wow.
And did great pit stops all 4 times.
I think it was a 1.9 and a 2.1, which gave them an average of 2.0 as their pits,
crazy.
Which is pretty ridiculous.
Double stacking a little less impressive when Max has pulled out such a huge lead.
That's fair.
True.
That it's like you had time to. Well, you couldn't make a cup of good coffee, but you probably had K-cup time between between the 2 cars.
You know what would be a really impressive double stack? Kick Sauber. I want to see them try that one.
Did you see
with those wheel guns?
In the stands, there were fans with like yellow safety vests.
No.
And printed on the back were Kick Sauber Pit Stop Investigation Team.
Oh, good job, China. That's good.
Yeah.
That's good stuff. I like it. It should also be Lance Stroll brake testing team.
Yes, let's get to that. But before that, the rest of the pits here. So Verstappen and Perez both pit. Perez, though, loses spots to both Norris and Leclerc in so doing. Alonso also pits under safety car. This is his second stop and goes on to the soft tire. We get a restart on lap 26. There is some heavy braking into turn 1 here, Danny. Do you want to take us through this incident?
This wasn't turn 1, was it? This was wasn't this the penultimate turn? Am I crazy? Was this the Stroll situation?
Yeah.
In my head this was. No, I don't think so.
It's not turn 1. It's final turn.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
So it's the back of the snake. So
it's not even first turn. It's the hairpin before you get the turn onto the main straight.
Yeah.
Sorry, but it's on the restart, right?
It is on the restart. So it's whenever Verstappen, forgot his name there for a second because he just never comes up, Don't know. Whenever Max Verstappen
drives straight out of relevance for race discussion.
in the same part of my brain as Mika Hakkinen. Verstappen gets away. I feel like they push right before the final turn, but the cars all kind of get boxed up a little bit as they're, the hairpin right after the or the tight turn, let's call it, right after that really, really long straight. And I think it's Alonso is the one who sort of messes up his braking zone a bit and creates a mild concertina where everyone else has to brake a little bit more harshly. But it's a restart. You kind of have to have your eyes on the prize here. And Lance Stroll just completely doesn't notice that Ricciardo has hit the brakes a little bit earlier on the replay, and it comes up later with Ricciardo when he's talking about it. You can see Stroll looking to the apex of the turn, trying to basically figure out his, I don't know what he's trying to figure out because he's not going to overtake before they all go, but he's doing something. So he takes his eye off the prize and he basically just rear ends, Ricciardo like a tailgating crash on a highway. He just plows into the back of him. Ricciardo's gets scooped up at the back, and Lance, perhaps confused as to what happened, maybe a little bit embarrassed, gets on the radio and starts complaining that they just brake checked him. I don't know why he's complaining about, but he's giving out about it. But did Ricciardo also tap Alonso in front of him? I don't know.
I think, if so, mildly.
Okay.
But Alonso was already in trouble. Ricciardo didn't cause anything with Alonso. Alonso locked up, and that triggered Ricciardo needing to sort of mash the brake. And then, if
I think
Ricciardo's
Piastri was
knocked
in there too, maybe. I forget.
Yeah.
But sorry.
That's right. Piastri did get a little tagged, right?
Yeah, I think it was Alonso, Piastri.
Yeah.
And then Ricciardo and then Stroll, I think. Am I right?
Well, Stroll... Sorry, go ahead.
Maybe not.
Well, do we want to talk about the penalty fallout for this?
Sure.
So, yeah, we have Stroll saying he just brake tested me, man. I think did that bring the safety car right back out as well? Because they had to abort the stop because you had all the
debris
chaos happening. So this is where things really go wrong we don't know how bad it is for Danny, but it's real bad. Because it turns out, one, unbeknownst to Danny yet, Stroll's broken the back of his car. His diffuser is busted. But two, in that chaos, Hülkenberg takes evasive action, gets around Ricciardo. Then the safety car ends up coming back out, and they don't resume racing. And now the order has been reshuffled because Hülkenberg advanced. Ricciardo, having recollected his car, sees that Hülkenberg got ahead of him and retakes his position ahead of Hülkenberg. Not allowed.
Right.
Can't do that. Hülkenberg was allowed to overtake Ricciardo because when you take evasive action for a car in distress, you can advance a position under safety car. But the same is not true. You don't automatically get your position back. So Ricciardo started making a unilateral decision to do that, triggers what is normally a 10-second penalty. In a few laps of limping around the track after the restart, he would realize he couldn't drive the car home. It was too compromised to continue racing, so he had a DNF. That turned into a 3-place grid drop for Miami.
That's rough.
Meanwhile, Stroll, real salt in the wound. The stewards did look at Stroll's role in the accident, and they came down hard, assessing him as at fault for the collision. Arguing that drivers are supposed to anticipate slowdowns like this at the final corner before a start. Nothing really unusual happened. It's just Stroll didn't anticipate a routine event properly.
Yeah.
So that is I forget what they assessed him for that. Was it 10-second? Did he have to burn off 10 seconds in the pits the next time he was in?
I never saw the penalty come up, so I don't know.
Yeah, I think it buried him. But either way, he was very sore about the whole thing. Ricciardo's comments after the race were really brutal about Stroll.
Because I think it was one of the journalists basically said, "Did you know that he's blaming you for this?" and then
Called you an idiot.
Yeah. And then Ricardo was like, "Well, that really pisses me off." He was like, "I was calm about it before, but now I'm angry." So, and he saw the video of it and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. So, just not a great look for Stroll, and yeah, shame for Danny after qualifying his teammate, both for the race and the sprint.
A salutary example, though, of why safe following distance is so key.
Yeah.
Just because you can fit your fucking car on there on the highway doesn't mean you should be there.
I'm going to take some
I left that gap ahead of me.
I'm going to take some gap from a lot of people who drive. It's my opinion that there's no brake check in which the person behind is not responsible for stopping. Like, unless somebody pulls in front of you and hits the brakes and they weren't in the lane you're in, if you're following someone, you always need to be driving defensively in a way that stops that from happening. And obviously F1 driving is different. you don't need to follow behind somebody for braking speed. But I think the fact that Ricardo and everyone was looking at Stroll going like, come on, man. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think there's much of much safe for him there.
These cars are unsafe at any speed.
That's
what
true.
you're saying.
Exactly.
Ricardo's teammate also not having a great time. Tsunoda spins after contact with Magnussen. Magnussen drifting wide on a turn.
Look at the way Drew, K-Mag's biggest fan on the podcast, phrased that. Tsunoda spun after contact with Magnussen. That was wild.
Great passive reporting. You should
Yuki, what are you doing over there?
You should work for the Wall Street Journal or for the New York Times. You get on their political desk. You'll do great.
Magnussen drifts wide on a turn and punctures Tsunoda's rear right with his front wing. Did you see that? Meanwhile, Alonso is making up spots with that soft tire, getting by Sainz on the back straight for 5th place. Lap 35, there's a big battle for last place.
I love when
between
this happens.
Stroll and Magnussen.
It was a good battle.
It was actually good.
Yeah.
Both cars trading positions for basically an entire lap. And then finally, I believe Stroll, edges out. Lap 39, Perez makes a dive down the inside of Leclerc at the hairpin to secure that 3rd place. Then lap 46, after ditching his soft tires for mediums, Alonso fights past Ocon for 10th place and begins his off-strategy climb back through the field. Only has 10 more laps to do it, though. He gets Hülkenberg 2 laps later on the back straight and then sets after Hamilton. And as he closes up to Hamilton, this is what Rob alluded to earlier, drops a wheel onto the gravel at the final exit and nearly loses the car.
Oh.
But what is most impressive to me is that it doesn't seem to faze him in the slightest because he goes right back into attack mode on Hamilton, who he passes without too much fanfare on those newer medium tires.
That's why he was complaining about Russell in Australia. He was like, you lose the car, you just get the car back. Like, what's the big deal? You don't crash, you just be good, you know.
Alonso's catchphrase, get good.
Yeah.
And lap 50, he gets by Piastri, Alonso does, for 7th place, where he will finish.
He will finish like 11 seconds ahead of Piastri as well. It's like he was going for it. But
yeah. Oh, gosh, you're right. 13?
Was it really by the end?
Yeah. And that's only after 6 laps. Crazy. That's like Max Verstappen distance. Max Verstappen wins this race. What do you know? 13 seconds, 0.7 ahead of Lando Norris in 2nd and Sergio Perez in 3rd. Followed by Leclerc, Sainz, Russell, Alonso, Piastri, Hamilton, and Hülkenberg getting that last point in 10th place. Behind them, we've got Ocon, Albon, back-to-back again, Gasly, Zhou, Stroll is in 15th, then Magnussen and Sargent, followed by the DNFs of Ricciardo, Tsunoda, and Bottas.
And I believe Alonso got fastest lap.
He did indeed. Sargent also got a 10-second time penalty for his own safety car infringement, and Magnussen received a 10-second penalty for causing that collision with Tsunoda, which is probably not his fault.
Well, it didn't change their order of last and second last.
Oh, yes, and that was the Chinese Grand Prix front to back.
Whole lot of Grand Prix. Whole lot of racing.
So much cars on track. And that is it for the race recap. Let's bring it to the news. Rob, I somehow missed this. points revamp is happening?
It's happening.
So I had missed when this moved into like a action item for the teams, but it came up a bit during the race. You heard the commentators talking about it, but over the course of the weekend, a lot of team principals were asked about the proposed revamp to how points are assigned, and nobody's raising any objections. So it seems like this is probably going to be a done deal for 2025. It basically, the idea here is it's going to extend the points down into P12. And the argument for it, as you might expect, is that especially because things have gotten really tight in, P1 through 10, that you have a lot of like racers in the midfield or toward the back who there's a clear pecking order, but it's not being reflected in points hauls for the races because just nobody can crack into the points. And so people want the sense is there's clearly a lot of good racing and intense competition happening down into the mid pack that should be relevant for race points as well, not just bragging rights. So the points are going to stay as they are, and I think this is probably why it didn't ruffle any feathers. P1 through 7 doesn't change. It's going to be what it's been for ages. And then P8 goes from 4 to 5 points, and then it's so on and so forth down to P12, which is now the 1 point finish. And there's a few. It's a little bit controversial. There's some, there's some old heads in F1 who are like, it should be hard to get an F1 point, right? This has always been the, that first. There's a lot of firsts in a driver's career. The first time you finish in the points is one of those milestones. Now it's easier to get to, but I think what they're trying to get at is that there's a lot of teams that, you're clearly. You clearly got like the 11th place car, right, on the grid or something, but you can still get kind of screwed out of really like money at the end of the season if you don't. If you just get a bad bounce, you're not in position to take advantage of what the few times there's DNFs in front of you. Teams sort of jump up. I'm curious how this is going to play out because I think I'm sympathetic to the notion of we do want that good racing to be meaningful and be rewarded, but I do kind of wonder if what we kind of like is a bit of variability. Like the high variance of wow, how did a backmarker team get into P7 in the championship? It can be because they catch those lucky bounces.
They had like 2 lucky races where they grabbed like 3 or 4 or 5 points, and you're like, oh, here we go.
Yeah, and I think, if you have the points go down a little further in the order, you're going to have a slightly more, a little more predictable of a championship.
Yeah.
But that's not necessarily a bad thing.
If you filled, I bet you could like run data models and figure all this stuff out. Although you'd have to, also predict how drivers would change based on the new points. But for example, if you had all 20 places getting points, then we talk about this a lot over the more races there are, the more the sort of, the statistical anomalies account for less of them. You kind of get, it all kind of gets like shaken out the way it should get.
Well, kind of like the IndyCar model, where it's like their point system seems to be entirely about making sure that like your points haul is incommensurate with overall performance across the entire race weekend.
Right.
Which I think probably is pretty cool, but the kind of difference there is a spec series, so I think it's a little bit more of a overall like driver skill and racecraft type competition.
Well, nobody wants F1 to be a meritocracy either. Like we enjoy the fact that cars sometimes break down and cars sometimes go off the track, and that we like the variability. It's what what I mean. Like it's not like there are some sports I think where the sort of like boxing or something where like the sort of the prowess and the consistency of somebody is what you like. But in F1, I think in motorsport in general, perhaps outside of spec series, we like that variability. I think it adds to it. So yeah, it's a good point. Like on the face of it, I was like, oh, that's cool. Like in these situations, then some of the teams that creep in to the who are almost in the top half of the table will get some get some cheddar for it. But does that make it so that the lower teams are punished even more because like the lower midfield teams are now getting points that push them up? I don't know, but you know, it's always just like the problem with F1 rules is it's always a monkey paw. It's always like we think it's going to improve the spectacle in this way, and then it has this apparent, you know, domino effect that we never saw coming. Or sometimes it's the opposite. It's like, oh, I'm not sure if that's going to work, and then there's like this weird other positive things that comes out of it. And then also the teams are too smart and they adapt. They see the new rule sets, and even if it's not how the cars are set up, even if it's just how the points work, maybe they, you know, protect more, you know, the 12th position. Maybe teams are closer back there than at the front so that they're able to like hold on to those positions. I don't know. Yeah, it's a funny one.
Also a funny one, the Sauber pit stops. Rob, I believe you flagged this article here with a little shedding some light on why they were so bad for so long.
Yeah, well, they've talked to the press about what's going on, and it's, you know, to a degree, there's nothing surprising here. Every year, no, not every year, nobody says you have to do this, but every year you're trying to save weight, and Sauber, like any team does, was trying to figure out how do you reduce the weight of the wheel nuts and make pit stops a little bit faster at the same time. And so, you know, they went and they invented a lighter wheel nut and a sort of a threading spec that would like enable the wheel guns to, like, you know, hit full tightness faster. So you'd have faster pit stops, less heavy wheel nut, more room for weight in other areas. But obviously they got it wrong, right? Like, this is what they developed for this season, you know, was developed based on simulation data, and then it didn't survive first contact with reality. So the real catch of it, though, they couldn't just go back to last year's spec because the car they have this year is so new. There's no interoperability between the wheel guns they had last year and the wheel nuts they had last year with anything on this year's car. So they're having to like design and fabricate new stuff to solve this problem. So they don't have that in place yet. It's we know what the issue is, and we will have a durable fix later this year. Man, I don't know. It, like, you know, we talked about this when these issues first started happening. It's like, I'm sure every team chases these little marginal gains, but this sort of seems like it's literally reinventing the wheel. Like,
Jesus.
Is there even what like 0.05 of a second of a pit stop is worth chancing these kinds of screw ups?
I mean, when you're in the back of the field, like, you gotta take risks. I don't know.
It's really wrecked what's been a pretty good season for Valtteri. This is the weird thing. Like, my impression this season is Valtteri's like driven actually a number of really good races that just, speaking of things not showing up in the points, there's been so much bad luck with pit stops and then the engine going out this race that, like, I think Valtteri's like quietly had a little mullet-powered renaissance that is a little bit hard to see because the results haven't matched what he's doing across these weekends.
Yeah. Speaking of drivers, I will always fight for Valtteri Bottas. Yeah, I mean, they did do a 3-second stop in the Chinese Grand Prix.
It's only 50% more than Red Bull.
Yeah. All right, let's run down the standings here. Max Verstappen is ahead in the Drivers' Championship by a good margin. He's got 110 points. His teammate Sergio Perez is in second with 85. Charles Leclerc is in third with 76. Carlos Sainz, his teammate, in fourth with 69.
Nice.
Lando Norris is in fifth with 58. Oscar Piastri, his teammate, in sixth with 38. By the way, there is that pattern: Red Bull, Ferrari, McLaren. Then we got the Mercedes of George Russell in seventh with 33. Fernando Alonso with 31 is in eighth. Then Lewis Hamilton in ninth with 19 points. And then Lance Stroll in 10th with 9. So then it goes Mercedes, Aston.
Yeah, big drops too.
Yuki Tsunoda is in 7th. I'm sorry, in 11th with 7. Oliver Behrman's still on the board with 6 points in 12th. Nico Hulkenberg and in his Haas is in 13th with 4 points. Kevin Magnussen behind him with 1 point in 14th place. Then the 15th and on down, Albon, Ocon, Zhou. Boy, they're right back to back all the time. Zhou, Ricardo, Gasly, Bottas, and Sargent all have 0 points. In the constructor standings, Red Bull Racing is on top with 195. Ferrari's in second with 151. Boy, that gulf between them and McLaren, 151 to 96. I wonder if we're going to get, solidification of first and second in the constructor standings much earlier than we usually do. Mercedes is in 4th with 52. Aston Martin's in 5th with 40. Then we've got a big jump down to RB in 6th with 7 points. And maybe this will also, these 12 points will do things to make this curve a little more gentle instead of the 40 to 7 gap that we have now. Gene Haas and team are in 7th with 5 points, and then Williams, Alpine, and Sauber all have 0. If you'd like to join the standings yourself in the Shift+F1 Fantasy League, you can do so using the link in the show notes. Remember when I was surprised that we had like a 5-way tie?
Yeah.
Last week.
Uh-oh. What we got?
We have a 30-way tie for first place for the Chinese Grand Prix.
It'd be very fun if you read all the names. It'd be a very good.
Is it
thing.
30?
You shouldn't.
This might be 30. I think this is actually 39. Yeah,
Wow.
39
That's the most
way
it could have
tie.
been if you said 30.
Let's see. I'll just pick some here.
Sure.
Perez, your luck, no hammies.
He's skipping all the lewd ones, which is most of
Who
them.
is Husky Chocolate?
That's a good question.
Is that an
I guess.
Ayn Rand joke?
Husky.
Who is
Who's John Galt?
John Galt? Yeah. Leclerc delusion syndrome. I don't know what that means. Amex Venmo power thirst.
That's great. Power thirst. Amazing.
V carb your enthusiasm. That's good.
Yeah. Strong.
Uncle Gene's Haas beans.
Uncle Gene's gone home, man. Uncle Gene ain't here.
Shift Alt F4. Love it. A favorite of mine, Obi Guan Yu Jobi. Haas of the Dragon.
Great stuff.
Yuki's radio sensor. The Fast of Us Part 2.
Nice. Very good.
And makes no darn signs. Yeah. But overall, we do not have a tie. We have in third place Seat for Signs. In second place, Stroll Hats Up. And in first, Obi Guan Yu Jobi.
Oh, great. Good. I hope they're my new favorite team. That's a great name.
Yeah. Oh, boy. You can send us an email if you like at shiftf1podcast@gmail.com or f1.cool/emails. You can also hit us up on the socials that are all in our show notes there if you like. You can see us around the internet. You can also race around the world,
Let's
Danny.
race around the world. Yeah.
Moto Grand Prix. MotoGP.
Vertiger.
Is at Circuito de Jerez
Jerez.
in Cadiz, Spain,
Cadiz, Spain.
for the Jerez Sprint and the Gran Premio de España. Formula E is at Monaco for the Monaco E Prix. Oh, Danny, we have DTM. Yeah, back.
I love when
Yeah,
it's
it's
back. I love when it goes for a while and then it comes back. It feels good.
Yeah, it keeps the magic alive. Motorsport Arena Oberschlafen.
Deutschland Oberschlafen.
Oschersleben. The NASCAR Xfinity Series is at the Dover Motor Speedway in Dover, Delaware.
Dover, Delaware. Not to be confused with the White Cliffs in the south of England. Different.
Be a hell of a
for
place
the-
to put a race
It
track.
would. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Jeez Louise. Yeah.
Yeah.
Treacherous. Be like then it would be like every rally, you know?
Yeah. Xfinity's racing in Dover for the Bet Rivers 200.
Bette Midler?
Yep.
Okay. Sure.
The IndyCar Children's of Alabama Grand Prix.
Finally. Get those fucking
It's a-
kids. Get those kids in those cars. Let's go. They're so light. Can you imagine? Perfect.
See, I was going to
Child
make a joke
labor
about
laws
them
being repealed
sponsoring
right
it.
and left.
Yeah, their tiny little skulls bouncing around those helmets. Let's go.
The NHRA Circle K 4 Wide Nationals, parentheses Concord, are in Concord, North Carolina.
Call me when it's the Sheets one.
The what?
Sheets. How are you at your East Coast?
Famous regional gas
Gas.
station.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Grocery store.
Why am I forgetting the other one? Sheets isn't even the one I used to go to. What was the other one called? What's the big? There's the big Sheets versus Wawa. Wawa's the good one.
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
I thought Wawa was just a Pennsylvania thing. But
Yeah, Maryland too. I think Sheets might actually be better, but I lived in Maryland, so I gotta. If I cross that line and go for Sheets, they'll take away my Old Bay subscription.
Isn't that what the Koopas say in the new Super Mario Brothers?
The sentence I just
Wawa.
said. Oh, okay. Wawa. That's right. Maybe is this the live action one back in the day? I haven't seen that one in a while.
No, the John Leguizamo movie?
Yeah,
No. I don't believe he says Wawa.
he probably does in one of his other movies. John Leguizamo does a lot of weird stuff. Romeo and Juliet. He probably says Wawa, or the Pest. He probably says it in the Pest.
menu. Oh.
Yeah.
We also got NASCAR.
Dover.
Also Dover. For the... I'm not quite sure how to pronounce this.
Okay.
Verth
what?
400. It's a W followed by a U with the two dots.
I thought you said birth 400. And I was like, what the hell is going on? Like, what sort of, like, I know we live in a post-row hellscape now, but
I'm so sorry to do that to you. No, Verth in the German. Verth.
Nothing more American than a German wholesale fastener company.
Is that what it is?
It is. I looked it up. You want to know something else about Verth?
Sure do.
Guess what year Verth was founded? Take a guess. Take a real guess. Guess what decade?
2004.
Guess what decade in human history Verth was founded? That's right, the 1940s. Guess who its founder was called? Guess the first name of its founder. That's right, Adolf. Adolf Verth.
look. The problem is Adolf was like, it was up there as names go.
like
Unfortunately, you're in that cohort before like Adolf went from a name to a guy. And you're just in that awkward cohort where it's like
Like Arnold. Can't really name anybody Arnold now. Or Elvis.
it sets up poor expectations, difficult expectations.
Or Katrina.
I don't know what they were doing in the 1940s that got them so much money, but made them such a great organization.
Oh, God.
But anyway,
Anyway, we're racing. A race. And that's okay. That's gonna do it for this episode. Boy, I'm tired. That was a lot to talk about.
There was a lot of racing. There was simultaneously a lot of racing and not that much to talk about, which are the most tiring ones to talk about. When we have one of those races, we got like one race that was just completely bananas. It's great. But you're having to constantly shift your perspective to these distinct versions of the... And I wonder what it's like. Like, I'd love people to email in and tell us what do they think of the sprint. Because, I like the sprint stuff, but there's no flow between the sprint and the race. Like, it very much feels... Like, practice, qualifying race, there's a sort of a flow to that, even if it is, maybe less interesting. But the sprint stuff definitely feels a bit more disjointed. And I liked the format this year, but the whole race, and maybe this also might have been like a West Coast thing, but like the sprint race was at such an amazing time for us. It was like
8 p.m. I watched it live.
It was amazing. It was 8 p.m. on a Saturday.
Yeah.
It was like, that was awesome. But then what was really weird was qualifying was at midnight. So whereas if you're in the UK, and obviously with a lot of listeners who are in the UK and Europe, the sprint race was on, like I think it might have been 6 or 5 in the morning, and then the race was on, you know, at like more of a normal breakfast time wake up on the Saturday. Sorry. So even then it's even weirder. So like maybe it's less enjoyable. Maybe you wake up and there's a really good sprint and you watch the highlights and then you watch, I don't know, but it's just it's a funny one. We don't have a sprint for a little while. We have a funny couple of races coming up too. The next one's Miami, and then we're in Imola, and then we're in Monaco, and then Canada, and then Europe, like Spain, Austria, UK, Hungary, the whole way.
Canada.
Yeah, Canada. It's, you know, I mean, they have the Queen is her Royal Maj Highness is on the, you know, on the money, right? So it's right there.
Also on the money, Rob Zachney. Final thoughts.
I do enjoy the video that Danny shared here in the chat. The cooldown room is the best. I feel like we need more of it. They could actually just skip the driver interviews after the race and just lock them in the cooldown room for longer and mic it better. And I think that'd be just like primo content.
And put on the
because watching
stupidest,
them all react,
like the most react-worthy parts of the race.
When they all took in the chain reaction collision and watched Stroll sort of dive under the back of Danny Rick's car, it was terrific reaction stuff.
Max just started laughing.
Covered his face because he was laughing so hard at what had just happened. That was good stuff. It was a better racing weekend than I thought. I don't know. I don't remember China being this interesting a racetrack, and I'm wondering if it just kind of agrees with the performance profile of these cars. I do not remember this amount of like wheel to wheel down through that corkscrew happening before, but like guys were really pushing it.
Or in sector 2, like
finding weird places to pass. Yeah,
it was a more memorable race than I think, you know, any other Chinese Grand Prix where it had never sort of stood out for me as a venue. So that was cool. Okay. The Worth Company started in 1945. My suspicion they were selling screws in 1945. I suspect this is a company that sort of blew up maybe because of the Marshall Plan, like rebuilding after the war.
Get out there with some it's like in Fallout. Just get out there with some you know, a lot of rubble out there with some metal in it. Just, you know, go harvest that stuff. Sorry, I went for the low-hanging fruit on that one. I apologize to our beautiful Worth employees who listen to this podcast. You're worth it.
You're worth it. If you'd like to support the show and get access to all of our bonus episodes, the ad-free version of the podcast, and the official Shift+F1 Discord, you can do so over at patreon.com/ShiftF1. Have a good race weekend, everyone. We will see you all